So today we will be talking about reliability and validity, sampling size, and research proposal. But before we start our session, it is very important for us to clear some misconceptions which I observed in last week's DQ activity. Students seem to be confused between items and scale. Items are the questions that are asked to conceptualize a particular variable. Scale is the parameter where those questions or items are measured. So consider the example in the slide. We are measuring here job involvement. Okay, so job involvement has 9 questions. So there are 9 questions to measure job involvement. Okay, for instance, the first question states, my job means a lot more to me than just money. Major satisfaction in my life comes from my job. I'm very interested in my work. All these questions, they are used to measure job involvement. Now these are the items. Okay, so basically these are the items, and right there in the front of these items, adjacent to these items, this is the scale to measure job involvement. So whenever we talk about research instrument, it includes item as well as scale. So in our research instrument, we need to make discussion regarding your items or questions as well as your scale. So we need to see how other researchers who have worked on similar topic have measured the same concept. For instance, job involvement, this research instrument is taken from this author, White Andrew, 1973's research work. So we need to see how the researchers who have worked on the similar topic have measured the same concept which we are using in our research. So one way to do is to explicitly look for those questions or items that are used to measure our variables in our theoretical framework. This is called as scale adaptation. This is what we discussed in our last session as well. But if there are no existing items to measure the variables you are investigating in your research, then it implies that your variable is not operationalized. You will need to operationalize the variable for the very first time, and you would have to break down the concept into dimensions and elements or items which are called as questions. Therefore, usually when we refer to the term scales, we are implying here the complete research instrument that is used to measure a particular concept. It includes questions as well as measurement of these questions on particular scales like Likert scale, like semantic scale, or like staple scale. So whenever we use the term scale here, it refers to the whole research instrument that is shown in your slide. So this is something which you need to clarify because whenever we use the term scale, it refers to the items, the questions which are measuring the concept, as well as the measurement of those questions. So scale refers to the complete research instrument which include items as well as the measurement of those items, which are commonly referred to as scale. So please clarify this. Whenever we use the term job involvement scale, job involvement questions are included, and job involvement, the parameters which are used to measure the job involvement questions, they are included as well. So this is the misconception which I needed to clarify, which was regarding your DQ8. Okay, so this week's lecture plan is divided into 3 different parts. In the first section, we will discuss about reliability and validity of research instruments. In the second section, we will discuss about sampling size. And in our third section, we will discuss about research proposal. So let us begin our today's session by discussing reliability and validity. So we need to be reasonably sure that the research instrument we use in our research do indeed measure the variables they are supposed to measure, and that they measure them accurately. This ensures that in operationally defining variables, we have not overlooked some important dimensions and elements or included some irrelevant ones. In other words, there are not irrelevant questions in our questionnaire that are actually not measuring the concept we aim to measure. So we have 2 very important concepts here: reliability, which is a test of how consistently a measuring instrument measures whatever concept it is measuring. So the key word here is consistency. So the reliability of the instrument states the consistency of that measurement tool, whether that measurement tool, if repeated in another sample, will it be able to measure the other sample in the same way. So basically, it is about the consistency, the consistency of the performance of the scale. Validity is a test of how well an instrument that is developed measures the particular concept that it is intended to measure. So validity is about accuracy of the scale, that whether the research instrument which we are using in our research is accurately measuring the concept, which is the focus of our research investigation. So validity here refers to the accuracy of the measure, and reliability here refers to the consistency of the measure. So we will discuss this in detail in the coming slides. So it will clear any doubts you might have regarding these two concepts. Okay. So when we talk about validity, uh, you know, in addressing validity concerns, we are going to examine the validity of the measuring instrument itself. That is, when we ask a question, we ask a set of questions with the hope that we are tapping a concept. How can we reasonably certain that we are indeed measuring the concept we set out to measure and not something else? This implies that, for instance, if we are measuring the concept of job satisfaction, can we be reasonably sure that the questions in our survey are measuring only job satisfaction and not something else? Like, they are not measuring job involvement, they are not measuring job commitment. So the questions in our questionnaire, within that variable, they must be measuring the concept which they are supposed to measure. So when we talk about the types of validity, there are three types of validity. There is construct validity, there is content validity, there is criterion validity. So let us discuss these three types one by one. So when we talk about construct validity, it is the adherence of a measure to existing theory and knowledge of the concept being measured. So construct validity evaluates whether a measurement tool really represents the thing we are interested in measuring, whether a measurement tool is really measuring the concept we are interested in measuring. So construct validity is about ensuring that the method of measurement matches the construct you want to measure. If you develop a questionnaire to measure job satisfaction, you need to know, does the questionnaire really measure the construct of job satisfaction? Or is it actually measuring the employee's engagement in the work, or employee's commitment with the organization, or some other construct? So construct validity is basically concerned with the evaluation whether a measurement tool really measures the thing that we are interested in measuring. Okay, so this is the construct validity. The second type is content validity. It is the extent to which the measurement covers all the aspects of the concept being measured. So content validity assesses whether a research instrument is representative of all aspects of the construct. For instance, if I develop an end of semester research methods question paper, a research methods examination paper for the class, that exam should cover all the research concepts which we have discussed during the course of this semester. If some concepts are left out, then question paper or examination paper is not accurate representative of the concepts which we have studied, and the results of students may not be an accurate indication of students' understanding of the subject. Similarly, if I include questions that are not related to research methods, the results are no longer a valid measure of a research methods knowledge. So content validity basically assesses whether a research instrument is representative of all aspects of the concept. For instance, in our last session, we discussed about operationalization of the concept of achievement motivation. We discussed that achievement motivation can be divided into 5 different dimensions. Okay, so this is the content validity. It shows that if all the five dimensions they are able to cover the all possible conceptualization of achievement motivation, then this concept has content validity. This concept has sufficient content validity. For instance, if achievement motivation has only three dimensions, and there are other dimensions which are not covered in our research instrument, then we can say that the concept of achievement motivation is not fully operationalized, because there are certain dimensions, there are certain aspects of achievement motivation which have not been operationalized, which have not been defined in your questionnaire. So it means that the questionnaire lacks content validity. So in other words, a questionnaire, a research instrument shall be measuring all the aspects of a concept. Okay, so for instance, if you're talking about turnover intentions, turnover intention means that your intention to quit organization. So you can measure a turnover intention in two different aspects: turnover intention in short term and turnover intention in long term. If you ask the question that are you looking to quit this organization in next 2 to 3 months, this is a short term intention to measure a turnover. If you ask the question, are you looking to quit this organization in next 5 years, now this is a long term intention to quit. So if we are only focusing on the short term dimension of turnover intention, then we are not focusing on the long term dimension of the turnover intention. So it means in that case a turnover concept has not been fully operationalized, because all aspects of the concept are not included in your research instrument. That is why that research instrument would supposedly would not have sufficient content validity, which is a requirement of your in order to address your validity concerns. The third type is criterion validity. It is the extent to which the result of a measure corresponds to other valid measures of the same concept. Now, criterion validity evaluates how closely the results of your measurement instrument corresponds to the results of a different instrument. For instance, GRE test. Now, most of the students will take GRE test. GRE stands for Graduate Record Examination, which most of the students need to take in order to secure admission in American or European universities. GRE test has been shown as an effective tool for predicting how well a student will perform in graduate studies. So there has been a strong criterion related validity found in your score in GRE test and your performance in graduate studies. If you score well in GRE test, you are given admission. You are able to secure admission. Why? Because universities assume that students who score better in GRE tests, they are able to perform better in graduate studies as well. That is why, due to this criterion related validity between GRE test and your performance in graduate studies, there has been a strong criterion related validity found in GRE test. So these are the three types of validity which we will be focusing upon. But which particular type of validity which we need to focus upon, I will discuss after making all this discussion. Okay, so now let us focus on the types of reliability. So the first type of reliability is test-retest reliability. It refers to the consistency of a measure across time. So basically, it answers the question that do you get the same result when you repeat the measurement? So test-retest reliability measures the consistency of results when you repeat the same test on the same sample at a different point in time. Many factors can influence your results at different points in time. For instance, respondents might experience different moods, or external conditions might affect respondents' ability to respond accurately. So test-retest reliability can be used to assess how well a method resists these factors over time. Usually, a correlation measure is used to compare the similarity in the test results at two different points of time. The smaller the difference between the two sets of results, the higher the test-retest reliability. Usually, test-retest reliability is used in measuring those concepts which are expected to remain constant over the period of time. For instance, job motivation may not remain constant during your job. Some days you might feel more motivated as compared to the other days. On the other hand, IQ level of adults, it usually remain constant. So retest reliability measures shall only be used when you expect your concept to remain constant over time. So the concepts like job motivation, job commitments, they may vacillate, they may fluctuate in different time periods. So it is not recommended to use this method of reliability when you expect your concepts, you expect your variables to change over the time. Use it only on those variables which are expected to remain constant over the time. Okay. The second type of reliability is inter-rater reliability. It refers to the consistency of a measure across different researchers. So it basically answers the question that do you get the same results when different researchers conduct the same measurement? Because people are subjective, so different researchers, their perceptions of situations and phenomena, it will naturally differ. So reliable research aims to minimize subjectivity as much as possible so that a different researcher could replicate the same results. So this type of reliability is especially important if you're conducting a qualitative research. For instance, if you're using observation as the data collection method, we need to see that how two different researchers perceive and interpret the same situation. If their perceptions and interpretations are different, then there is low inter-rater reliability in the data. And data has some serious reliability concerns. If they're both of your researchers, they have similar interpretations, then it implies that you have high inter-rater reliability in your data. This is the second type of reliability. The third type of reliability is internal consistency. It refers to the consistency of the measurement itself. It answers the question that do you get the same results from different parts of a test that are designed to measure the same thing? So internal consistency assesses the correlation between multiple items in a test that are intended to measure the same construct. The internal consistency of measures is indicative of the homogeneity of the items in the measure that taps the construct. In other words, the items should hang together as a set and be capable of independently measuring the same concept so that the respondents attach the same overall meaning in each of the items. So when we discussed job involvement questionnaire in the beginning of the session, let me go to that slide. So when we were discussing this questionnaire, just focus upon that there are nine questions to measure the concept of job involvement. So internal consistency reliability refers to that each question, all 9 questions, they should be highly correlated to each other. Because when they're highly correlated to each other, it signifies that they are measuring the same concept. If they are not correlated to each other, it signifies that they are not measuring the same concept. First thing. Secondly, all these 9 questions, they must be measuring job involvement individually as well as collectively. So usually when a concept is measured by multiple items, which means when a concept is measured by more than one question, there are multiple questions to measure the same concept. Where all the questions are intended to measure the same concept, we use internal consistency reliability test. So you will see that this type of reliability test is often used when you employ multiple questions to test or measure a variable. Okay. So what is the relationship between reliability and validity? The concept of reliability and validity, it sounds pretty difficult, but Reliability and validity are concepts which are used to evaluate the quality of your research. They indicate how well a method, technique, or a test measures something. So, in short, reliability is about the consistency of a measure, and validity is about the accuracy of a measure. So let me explain the relationship between these two, terms. It is possible for you that your research instrument is neither valid nor reliable. It is also possible that your research instrument is reliable, but it is not valid. We don't want the situation where your research instrument is neither valid nor reliable because it seriously compromises the quality of your research. We also don't want our research instrument to be only reliable but not valid because it again casts doubts over the your measurement instrument and your research integrity. The third situation where your research instrument is fairly valid but it is not reliable, it is again something which you don't want as a researcher because this particular situation also casts doubts over the integrity of your research instrument. The last situation where your research instrument is valid and reliable, this is the perfect situation. This is an ideal situation for you. Let us discuss each situation separately. What is implied by your research instrument being neither valid nor reliable? Consider a weight machine. It sometimes, in the your actual weight is 60 kg. Okay, so you're going to measure your weight on a weight machine. In the first attempt, uh, your weight machine gives you the reading of 50 kg. Okay, which is incorrect. In the second attempt, it gives your weight as 100 kg, which is also incorrect. And the third time, it gives your weight as 75 kg, but your actual weight is 60 kg. The weight machine is unreliable because the results are not consistent. Because in each attempt, the weight machine gave you a different reading. So the results are not consistent. It means that the weight machine is not reliable because the results were not similar, results were not consistent, results were different. And the weight machine is also invalid. Why? Because it is not accurately measuring your actual weight. So this is an example where a research instrument can neither be valid nor reliable. The second case, we have a research instrument which is reliable but not valid. Again, consider the example of weight machine. Uh, a weight machine is continuously giving your weight as 65 kg. It is showing an error of plus 5 kg each time because your actual weight is 60 kg, but weight machine is giving you an error of 5 kg by showing your weight as 65 kg. Now, weight machine is reliable because each time you measure your weight, it produces the same reading. It produces 65 kg in the first attempt, it produces 65 kg in the second attempt, and in the third attempt, a similar reading is produced. It is reliable because it is consistently giving you a similar result. So it is reliable. But is it valid? No, it is not valid because the measurement is not accurate. Your actual weight is not being measured by weight machine. The third case, when your research instrument is fairly valid but not reliable, consider again the weight machine. It is giving you the result of 65 kg in the first attempt. In second attempt, it gives you the result of 62 kg. In the third attempt, it furnishes the reading as 58 kg. Now, as your actual weight is 60 kg, the results of weight machine are fairly close to your actual weight, but results are not reliable as consistent results are not being produced by the machine. There is an error of 3 to 5 kg in each attempt. This shows that research instrument is fairly valid. Why? Because the results are closer to your actual weight, but it is not reliable because each time the readings are different. Lastly, the ideal scenario for us is that our research instrument is both, valid and it is reliable. So consider again the weight machine. Uh, Weight machine gives your result as 60 kg, which is your actual weight. Then you again measure. It again furnishes the reading of 60 kg. So it produces same result in multiple attempts. So it shows that weight machine is reliable Why? Because it is producing the same result in multiple attempts. And weight machine is valid. Why? Because it is actually producing actual weight. Your actual weight is being read by the weight machine. So we want our research instrument to be both valid and reliable. So that is why we need to use well validated and reliable measures to ensure that our research is scientific. Fortunately, measures have been developed for many important concepts in business research, and their reliability and validity has been established by the researchers, by the developers. So therefore, you can use those research instruments which have already been developed. For instance, in order to measure job satisfaction, you don't need to create new tool. In order to measure job involvement, you don't need to create new tool, because all these research instruments have been developed. This is the reason, due to these validity and reliability concerns, I suggested you to go for scale adaptation instead of developing new scales. So this was the main reason, because if you are going to develop new scale, then there are very serious concerns about the reliability and validity of your research instrument. Okay. Lastly, the most important question, which validity and reliability measures are we interested in? So it really depends upon our study design. Either we are going for quantitative research or qualitative research. For instance, if you are going for quantitative research, the most appropriate validity method which we use, it is the construct validity, because we are very interested to see whether our questionnaire, our instrument is measuring the concept which it is intended to measure. Whether job involvement, whether 9 questions of job involvement are really measuring a job involvement as they claim to be. So we use different statistical tests, like we use factor analysis, we use correlational matrices, which we will discuss in our coming sessions. So we will establish construct validity through these tests if you're doing quantitative research through surveys. When you're doing quantitative research, the reliability, concerns can be addressed by using internal consistency reliability. So we want to see that all the questions within the same variable, all the questions within the same research instrument, they are strongly correlated to each other. So it does not mean that, for instance, if you have one IV, which is job involvement, and if you have one dependent variable, which is job satisfaction, all the questions within job involvement, they should strongly correlate with each other. And all the questions within job satisfaction, research instrument, they should correlate with each other. So we are not saying that the questions of job involvement should correlate with the questions of job satisfaction. This is not the requirement of internal consistency, because they are two different research instruments. They don't have to correlate with each other. Okay, so here we imply that all the questions within the same variable, all the questions which are measuring the same variable, they must be internally consistent. They must be individually and collectively be measuring the same variable. So we establish this by alpha reliability coefficients. It is a very easy test to conduct, and through composite reliability as well. It is again not a very difficult test. So by using these statistical tests, we can also accomplish our reliability for our data. For qualitative research, it is slightly different. Our reliability and validity tests are very different for qualitative research. For instance, in qualitative research, you can use intercoder reliability to address your reliability concerns. Intercoder reliability refers to the extent to which two or more independent coders or researchers agree on the coding of the content of interest with an application of the same coding scheme. For example, while observing behavior of consumers towards new brand advertisement in a retail store, you can develop a coding scheme whether consumers get attentive to new advertisement, and if the advertisement is able to capture consumers' attention, how consumers respond to it, measuring the consumer response from being positive to being negative. So this is the coding scheme. So now two independent coders, they will code behavior of the same consumer and see whether they agree with each other with respect to their coding. If there is an agreement on majority of the instances on the behavior of the same consumer, we can say that there is intercoder reliability. So there are different ways to measure intercoder reliability. I usually prefer Krippendorf alpha. Krippendorf alpha is basically used to measure intercoder agreement. It takes a ratio of the level of agreement between two coders and gives us a a statistical number. Usually this number should be greater than 60%, 65%. So it means that usually our coders should agree around 65%, 70% times if you want to establish intercoder reliability. Okay. In qualitative research, validity can also be established through trustworthiness measures. For instance, one such method is iterative analysis, which involves repeated sampling, collection of data, and analysis of data until no new information is discoverable from data. So iterative process allows the researcher to visualize the emerging patterns, ways, and dimensions, much like what we discussed in the copy sites paper in our unit 2. So it allows the researcher to move back and forth through the data in order to find, compare, and verify the patterns emerged in the data. This process is repeated until data is saturated theoretically and no new information is possible. So it is slightly difficult to establish validity in qualitative research. The reason being that qualitative research is highly subjective in nature, so it is difficult to establish trustworthiness measures in the qualitative research. But we will discuss them while discussing the reliability and the validity concerns. Okay, so this is it for our first section. Any question about our first section? Anything which is not clear regarding our first section? Any clarity needed? Anything which is not clear? Any ambiguity in any concept which we have discussed? Okay, so let me continue with our second section, which is about sampling size. Again, a very important part, very important topic in your research project. As discussed in our last lecture, that reliable and valid sample should enable us to generalize the findings from the sample to the population under investigation. In other words, the sample statistics should be reliable estimates and reflect the population parameters as closely as possible within a narrow margin of error. So there is always margin of error when you are using sample statistics to estimate population. That is why issue of precision versus confidence is very important for you to understand. Precision refers to how close our estimate is to the true population characteristics. So let us say we have selected a sample of 50 employees from a total population of 300 employees in a workshop. We find that average daily production rate per person is 50 pieces of a particular product. So after doing certain calculations, we are able to say that the true average daily production of the product lies anywhere in the range of 50 plus minus 10. Now, 50 plus minus 10 means that it is between the range of 40 and 60 for the population of the employees in the workshop. So the range here is 40 and 60. So now we need to discuss that how precise this range is. So we are estimating that our population mean will fall between 40, which is the lower limit, and 60, which is the upper limit. Now, is this a very precise measure? because we have a margin of error of 20 units. Now, this is a huge margin of error. On the other hand, if we are able to estimate that our population mean will fall between 3 plus minus 5, it means that we are estimating that our population mean will fall between 45 and 55. So here the margin of error is just 10. So in which particular case we are more precise? We are more precise in our later case when we are estimating that our population mean will fall between 45 and 55. So we are more precise here. Okay, but in the first case, that when we estimate that our population mean will fall between 40 and 60, we are not very much precise. It is a very broad interval. It is on the other hand, between 45 and 55, it is not a very broad interval. It is a precise interval. It is a narrow interval. Now, if we look at the formula which is given in your slide, this particular formula, it has three different terms. N refers to your sample size. S basically refers to the the standard deviation of the sample. And Sx indicates the standard error or the extent of precision offered by the sample. So this is basically the extent of precision offered by the sample. So note that standard error or precision varies inversely with the square root of the sample size. Hence, if we want to increase the precision of our sample, we need to increase the sample size as well. Another noteworthy point is that the smaller the variation in the population, the smaller the standard error, which in turn implies that the sample size need not to be large. Thus, low variability in the population requires a smaller sample size. For instance, if you're doing research on students or young people, the people in the age bracket between 20 and 25, so it means that you are largely predominantly studying that population, which is mostly homogeneous in nature. Young people, they share similar shopping habits, they share similar musical tastes, they share similar brand preferences, they have similar movie choices. So it means that there is lesser variability in your population if you are only choosing students or if you are only choosing young people. But on the other hand, if you have chosen, the population as a whole, and that population includes students, it includes, married people, it includes, divorcees, it includes middle-aged people, it includes, older people, it includes urban people, it includes rural people. There's a lot of variability in that population. So if you are studying a population which has a lot of variability, in that particular case, you need to have a large sample size. But if you are studying a population which has low variability, the extent of variation in the population is low, then you can do well with the low sample size, with the small sample size as well. Okay, so let us try to establish the relationship between precision and confidence. So precision indicates how close we estimate the population parameter based on the sample statistic. Confidence indicates that how certain we are that our estimates will really hold true for the population. So confidence reflects the level of certainty with which we can state that our estimates of the population parameters based on our sample statistics will hold true. Okay, so for instance, in this particular example, when we estimated that the population mean will fall between 40 and 60, in this particular scenario, the precision is less, but we can be more confident about it because we have a huge margin of error. We have a high margin of error, so we can be more confident that our population mean will fall between 40 and 60 due to the high margin of error. So there is less precision here, but there is more confidence in our estimate. So if we are estimating that our population mean will fall between 45 and 55, in this particular situation, we are more precise, but we will be less confident. Why? because our margin of error is pretty much low. It is a very narrow range. So there is a possibility that our population mean will not fall within this interval, will not fall within this range. So this shows that precision and confidence, they are, they have a very strange relationship. Sometimes you have to forsake confidence in order to be more precise, and on the other hand, you can forsake precision in order to be more confident. So if you want to be more confident, then you have to be you have to forsake a certain level of precision in your estimates. So usually in our research, in business research, a 95% confidence level is used. 95 times out of 100, we expect that our estimate will reflect the true population characteristic. And this is usually denoted by this value, p value. P is equal to or lesser than 0.05. Now, this is the most important value for you. When we will start our analysis part, you will realize that how important this value is, because our hypotheses are accepted or rejected depending upon this value. So when we say that p value is 0.05 or lesser than 0.05, we we are saying that, in other words, that at least 95 times out of 100, we believe that our estimate will reflect the true population characteristic, or we have only a chance of 5% or lesser of getting our estimate wrong. So we are saying that in this particular scenario, that we have only 5% or lesser chance of getting our population estimate wrong. So this is a very important characteristic. And so in business research, we will be largely relying on 95% confidence interval. So I will discuss in detail that why 95% confidence interval is related, how it is related to your sampling size. So in other words, we are saying that we have to make a trade-off between confidence and precision. We have noted that if we want more precision or more confidence or both, the sample size needs to be increased, unless, of course, there is a very little variability in the population itself. However, if the sample size cannot be increased for whatever reason, say we cannot afford the cost of increased sampling, then with the same sample size, the only way to maintain the same level of precision is to forsake the confidence. So in figure A, we have a very narrow interval. So we are very precise in our estimate. We are estimating that our population mean will fall within this narrow estimate, but we are only 50% confident. We are only 50% confident that our population mean will fall within this narrow interval. On the other hand, in the figure B, we have a very broad interval. We have a very broad range. So we are estimating that our population mean will fall within this range, and we are 99% confident. But there is very less precision here. It is a very broad interval. In the figure A, there is a lot more precision here, but there is a very marginal confidence. We are not very much confident. So we have to make this decision. Are we going to compromise our confidence level to get more precision, or are we going to compromise our precision to be more confident about our estimates? So personally, like I discussed in our last slide, we usually go for a 95% confidence interval. When we are using 95% confidence interval, let's say it will be around here. So 95% confidence interval is reasonable. It gives you reasonable precision, and it gives you reasonable confidence level as well. So 95% confidence interval, although it is still pretty broad, but it is not very broad. So I would suggest all of you to use 95% confidence interval. So what is the relationship of this confidence interval with your sampling size? Now let us get to that discussion. So determining sample size is easy if these three conditions are fulfilled. First of all, we need to know about our population size, total population size. We need to know about our confidence level. We need to know about our margin of error. Now, usually we are sure about our confidence level. Just like I mentioned that you need to be done 95% confident about your estimates. That's sufficient. Margin of error is very easy to calculate. Margin of error is 1 minus confidence level. It gives you 1 minus 0.95. It gives you the value of 0.05. Okay, so this is something which is problematic. In most of the situations, you are not aware of your total population size. So what to do in those particular situations when you are not aware of your population size? So let's discuss first the case where you are aware of your population size. This is the formula where you can measure your sample size. Small n indicates your sample size. Large N is basically about your population size, and E is your margin of error. Okay, so E is your margin of error, which is 1 minus your confidence level. Okay, so sometimes it is difficult to calculate your sample size manually. Therefore, there are many websites and there are many search engines which help you to calculate a sample size automatically. For instance, I have given you a link of one search link, SurveyMonkey. You go to this website. On this particular link, it gives you this particular interface. Okay, so this particular interface, it requires you to enter three information types. Number one, enter your population size, enter your confidence level, enter your margin of error, and just click OK, and they will give you a sample size. So for instance, if you're doing research in WKU, so your research population is WKU students. Now, because your research population is confined within a university, you can know the total number of WKU students. For instance, if the total number of WKU students are 5,000, and you want to be 95% confident that your results drawn from the sample reflects your population, that gives you a margin of error of 5. So you will put 5,000 here in the population size, that is the number of students studying in WKU. You will put 95 here in the confidence level, and you will put 5 in your margin of error. So when you click OK, this calculates your sample size as 357. So 357 is the number if you want to confidently estimate your WKU population. So you need a sample size of 357 to confidently to be 95% sure that you will estimate your WKU population. So now you got the final number. How will you go about getting these 357 responses? It depends upon your sampling strategy. So if you think all the four faculties of WKU, which includes College of Business, College of Arts, College of Architecture, and College of Science, these are the four faculties. So if you can get the updated population list of all these four faculties from university administration of all the 5,000 students, then you can randomly generate 357 entries by using random number generator formula, which is usually present in Microsoft Excel. So you can use that random number generator and you can generate randomly 357 sample size. But if you don't have that updated population list, how will you go about collecting this sample size of 357? Now, because your population has clearly identified subgroups, there are four different faculties. Assuming that all these faculties are similar in size, now you want to distribute your sample size into four different four parts. So it means that you have to recruit 90 subjects from each faculty. You can use quota sampling. Quota sampling means that you can decide to select these 90 students from each of the four faculties and choose those 90 subjects on convenience basis. This will give you a sample size of 360, which is the required sample size for your population. So this is the situation when your total population size is known. You can easily calculate your sample size. But in situations when your population size is not known, what to do? Well, in those particular situations, when your sample size, when your population size is not known or your population is very large, you can use this particular equation. This equation, it has, very important parameters. For instance, n stands for your sample size. Z stands for your confidence interval. Z score is your confidence interval score when you're using Z distribution. I hope you have read about a T distribution and Z distribution in your business statistics course. So usually at 95% confidence interval, a Z value is 1.96. So Z value is 1.96 at 95% confidence interval. P is basically population proportion. Population proportion is usually set at 50% unless otherwise specified. So we will be using 50% here. So 0.5, 1 minus 50% is again 0.5. So this is it. E is again your margin of error, 1 minus confidence interval. Our confidence interval is 0.95. So this gives us the value of E as 0.05. After doing simple maths, we get the number of 385. So if we want to be 95% sure that our sample estimates our population and we don't know about our population size, then at least you need to have 385 respondents. Now this was a mathematical figure about 95% confidence interval. Suppose you want to be 99% confident. So this changes your mathematical figures because Z value for 99% is 2.58. So you take the square of 2.58 and then you multiply this. This remains constant, and your margin of error is then I think 0.01. You take the square. So if you are you want to be 99% confident that your sample estimates your population characteristics, then you need your sample size. After these calculations, you will get the figure of I think around 16,000. So you will get the figure of 16,000. So this is a huge number for a sample size. So that is why we are going for 95% confidence interval. If you go for 99% confidence interval, the sample size becomes very, very large, which is not manageable in lots of situations. So this is how you calculate your sample size when your population size is not known. And there are other guidelines as well. For instance, Roscoe in 1975 proposes these rule of thumbs for determining sample size. They say that minimum sample size could be 30 and between 500 and 30. Well, usually this sample size, the 30 sample size, is basically for experimental research. I would say that in each condition of experimental research, you can afford to have 30 subjects, but if you're conducting a quantitative research based on surveys, then 30 would be very less because you cannot run lots of statistical tests based on this number. Okay, so when samples are to be broken into subsamples like male, female, junior, senior, subordinate, supervisors, a minimum sample size of 30 for each category is necessary. Okay, that's a very self-explanatory. If you're doing a multivariate research which includes cause and effect relationship using multiple regressions, then your sample size should be several times, preferably 10 times as large as the number of variables in the study. So it means that if you have 4 variables, your sample size should be around 40. Again, this is something which I will not recommend because there are certain reasons, because at this sample size 40 or 30, we cannot run some statistical tests So, I will discuss in my next slide. I will give you a more, a statistical friendly sample size formula for you. Fourth, for simple experimental research, for each condition, you can have sample size as small as 10 to 20. Again, for experimental conditions, this is acceptable. But for survey, it is too small. But for experimental, as mentioned by this researcher, as mentioned by Roscoe, it is acceptable. I will I will recommend using this particular, guideline for you. Usually, some researchers, they, from statistical perspective, believe that acceptable sample size is dependent upon a number of items in a questionnaire. So number of items in a questionnaire can also determine the size of the sample, as item to response ratio can determine whether certain statistical procedures can be applied on a sample or not. Uh, so generally, as postulated by Hare and his colleagues, that if item to response ratio is greater than 5 or up to 1:10, then we can have a sample size where majority of statistical tests can be applied. So here at all, we have this is a very important guideline regarding your sample size. So they say that 1:5 and 1:10 should be, used as a guideline to settle upon your sample size. So for instance, if there are 50 questions in your questionnaire excluding personal information, then sample size between 250, which is 1:5, and 500, which is 1:10, could be appropriate. So this is a very important guideline in order to settle upon your sample size. I would say that be as close as possible to 1:10, because it gives you a better sample size. So if you have 30 questions in your questionnaire, I would recommend that you should at least have 300 responses. 1:10, 30 into 10 is equal to 300. So I would recommend that you should be using 1:10 as a guideline to determine your sample size. Minimum sample size should be 1:5. If for some reasons you are not able to collect data, then at least you should be following the the minimum sample size. So the minimum sample size is 150. If you have 30 questions in your your questionnaire, then minimum sample size is 150. So I would really suggest that you should go for 1:10. But if somehow you are not able to fulfill this criteria, then you can settle somewhere in between, like you can settle somewhere in 200, 220 if you have 30 questionnaires. Okay. So if you cannot achieve 1:10, then you can settle somewhere between 1:5 and 1:10. Uh, but if you have, that is why I will recommend you to not use lengthy questionnaire. Do not use those scales which have lots of questions. For instance, if there are 25 questions to measure a single concept, and 25 questions to measure another concept, and 20 questions to measure another concept, this gives you a sample size. This gives you total question to be 65. 65 means 650. This is too much. Okay. And if you use 1:5 for 65 questions, this gives you 325 sample size minimum. So if you settle somewhere between 650 and 325, it will be like 500. This is again a huge sample size. So I would recommend using smaller questionnaires. Use those scales which are reliable and valid, but they are smaller in size. Okay, lastly, sampling in qualitative research. Sampling for qualitative research is as important as sampling for quantitative research. Qualitative sampling begins with precisely defining the target population. As a sampling technique, qualitative research generally uses non-probability sampling. Why? Because it does not aim to draw statistical inference. So in qualitative research, we are not looking to estimate population characteristics on the basis of sample statistics. We just want to explore deeply some phenomena. We just want to gain deeper insights about certain research areas. So the purpose is different in qualitative research. So that is why they are using different sampling strategy as well. So qualitative research usually employs purposive sampling technique. The subjects are selected on the basis of their expertise in the subject, and one form of purposive sampling is theoretical sampling, which we discussed in Unit 5 while talking about grounded theory. We are only interested in recruiting those participants in our research who are qualified by possession of valuable information. So, what about sampling size in qualitative research? So, the general rule in qualitative research is that you continue to sample until you are not getting any new information, or you are no longer gaining new insights. Therefore, sample size may vary for qualitative studies. We discussed the same while discussing grounded theory, which refers to the idea that theory will emerge from data through an iterative process that involves repeated sampling, collection of data, and analysis of data until theoretical saturation is reached. Theoretical saturation is reached when no new information about the subject emerges in repeated cases. So, for instance, if you have conducted 40 interviews, and after 40 interviews, you see that there is no new information being reproduced. There is no new information being, emerged in your next interviews. Then this is a signal that you should stop at 40. Sometimes you will get the number of 50. After conducting 50 interviews, you will realize that you are not able to get any new information. So you will stop at 50. So the sample size in qualitative research is really dependent upon whether you have reached theoretical saturation. So at the point at which you reach the theoretical saturation, which means that you reach a point where no new information about the subject emerges in repeated cases, then you stop increasing your sample and you stop right there. So this is the case of sampling size in qualitative research. Okay, so we are done with our second part of our lecture as well. Any questions? If there is any ambiguity regarding anything? Any ambiguity so far regarding the two sections which we have discussed? Okay, so let me continue with our last section, which is about research proposal. A research proposal must tell you, your research supervisor and reviewers, the following three important informational characteristics about your study. First of all, what you are proposing to do. Secondly, how you plan to find answers to what you are proposing. And thirdly, why you selected the proposed strategies of investigation. Overall, it can be said that the goal of a research proposal is twofold. Firstly, to present and justify the need to study a research problem, and secondly, to present the practical ways in which the proposed study should be conducted. Okay, so the research proposal has these two important goals in the mind of researcher. So let us discuss the structure of your research proposal, and this is very important before you start writing your assignment number 3, because now I will discuss what should be written in each section of your research proposal. So your research proposal has 10 sections, and the first 3 sections I have put them together. You should write them separately, but they are together because they were part of your assignment number 1 and your assignment number 2. So the length of these three sections must not exceed 350 words. In the first section, you need to, in the introduction section, you need to provide brief background information about your research project and use the most important literature sources here. Instead of flooding this section with references, set a scene for the readers that within 100 or 150 words, readers can understand what you are trying to establish. In the second section, a novelty factor of research is discussed. In this particular section, sell your research agenda. Here you need to tell that how your research is different from other research projects already done on this topic or similar topics. So you need to answer two important questions here. Number one, how is your study different from existing researches? Number two, and why it is important to do research on the topic which you have chosen for your investigation. So you need to answer these two particular questions when you are, discussing the novelty factor. Number one, how is your study different from existing studies? And secondly, why it is important to do research on the topic which you have chosen for your investigation. The third section. The third section basically tells us about how clear you are in your research direction. So just present a theoretical framework, label variables there, write a brief paragraph where you explain the relationship among variables. If there is a theory you are using, tell us how that theory link these variables and list down your hypothesis. So in total, these three sections shall not cross 350 words. Please do not repeat mistakes which you have made in assignment number 2. I will also request that from your assignment number 2 and assignment number 1, just copy paste hypothesis, and that too from your assignment number 2. And that's it. For other things, please write the brief summary in your own words in a simpler manner, so you yourself become more clearer about what you are trying to establish in your research. So these are the first three sections of your research proposal. Now comes the most important section of your research proposal, which is study design. So in order to write down this section, smartly, you need to consult, lecture number 5. So in unit 5, we discussed about study design. So you need to answer these questions in study design. What is your research strategy? Now, only mentioning your research strategy is not sufficient. You also need to answer why. Why have you chosen this research strategy and why not any other research strategy? For instance, you might have chosen survey. Why you have chosen survey research strategy? Why not ethnography? Why not experiments? Why not observational research? Why not case study research? So you need to tell us why you have chosen this particular research strategy which you have decided for your research. Secondly, you need to argue. You need to justify your setting of research. Are you going for natural setting or artificial setting? If you're going for natural setting, why it is important for you to study the variables under investigation in their natural setting? Why they can't be studied in the artificial setting? So you need to justify your choices. Just mentioning that I will be using natural setting, it is not sufficient. Justify them. Justify your choices. What is the extent of your interference in the study settings? Are you going with minimum interference, which means doing research in the natural setting, or are you going with the maximum interference or medium interference, which implies artificial setting or experimental research design? What is your unit of analysis? Are you doing research on individuals or organizations? You need to mention this categorically. For instance, many students who are conducting research through secondary data, they are using countries as a unit of analysis. So you need to mention your type of data as well. Are you going for primary data or secondary data? Who makes up the study population? This is again very important because we just discussed that variability in your population has a direct impact on your sample size. If your population has a lot of variability, then it means that you need to increase your sample size. So who makes up your study population? Is it diverse enough or not, or is it not diverse? Is there a lot of variability, or there is not of lot of variability? You need to discuss these points. How you plan to approach this study population, again, a very important thing. How you plan to approach this study population. So these are the questions which you need to answer. Part 5 of your research proposal: data collection methods and sampling strategy. How will data be collected? So, are you conducting interviews or questionnaires or observations, or it is simply a secondary data and you're using, IMF reports or World Bank reports or government statistical reports? You need to tell us how you will collect your data, how and where you are going to approach your subjects. This is again very important. This gives us a clear picture of how clear you are about your research direction. For instance, if you're conducting research on students, you need to tell us that how you will approach those students. Will you approach them during the class, after the class, in cafeterias, in library, or simply in the WeChat groups? How will you approach them? Which sampling strategy is used and why? Now you need to mention your sampling strategy here, and this is basically the topic of your this week DQ activity as well. So this week's DQ activity will help you get more clear idea about your sampling strategy. Lastly, the size of the sample you are planning to select and your reasons for choosing this size. So I have given you at least 4 different approaches to calculate your sampling size, and you need to tell us that on the basis of those approaches, what would be your sample size, and why do you think that this appropriate sample size is sufficient for estimating your population characteristics confidently? So you need to discuss these things in this section of research proposal. Research instruments. Now you need to discuss that from where these questions or items which you are using to measure variables are sourced. Cite their references. Okay, give the reference of those authors, those research papers from where you have taken these questions, these items. Which scale is used to measure variables? You are going for interval, ordinal, nominal, or ratio scale. Which particular scale is used? Which scale type is used? For instance, if you're going for interval scale, are you going for Likert scale? Because then you have to tell us categorically that how that particular scale will be used. For instance, if you're using Likert scale, you need to tell us that you will be using 7-point Likert scale where 1 stand for this and 7 stand for this. And you have to create an appendix. The appendix part, you need to attach a complete questionnaire in your appendix. That questionnaire should be the finalized questionnaire that will be used to collect data. So you need to create an appendix in your research proposal. That could be at the end of your research proposal. Here you need to attach your finalized questionnaire which you will present to your subjects and who will answer that questionnaire. So you need to attach a finalized version of your questionnaire with your research proposal. And if you're using interviews, a complete interview plan with possible set of questions shall be attached in appendix. What about those students who are using secondary data? Now, if you're using secondary data, then you need to tell how are you measuring variables which you have chosen from secondary sources. For instance, in order to measure economic prosperity, you might take GDP per capita as a proxy measure of economic prosperity in a country. You need to give a logic why per capita income is taken as an indicator of economic prosperity and why not any other indicator like Human Development Index. Secondly, you need to tell the source which forms the basis of your choice. For instance, which authors have taken GDP per capita as a proxy measure of economic prosperity. Tell us about them. Then you will tell us how you're going to collect this information about GDP per capita. For which years are you going for panel data? Are you going for time series data? You need to tell us again all about these information in this section of your research proposal. Okay, 7, analytical methods. So analysis section in general terms describe the strategy you intend to use for data analysis. Specify which softwares and statistical procedures you plan to perform on the data. We will discuss this in our coming lectures, but for the purpose of for clarity, you need to read the analysis section of those papers which closely resemble your area of investigation and see which statistical tests and softwares they are using to perform the analysis. As we are mostly conducting cause and effect study, most of you would be using regression analysis. Some students who are comparing groups differences, they will be using ANOVA, which is analysis of references, analysis of variance. Those students who are comparing groups with two categories like male female, genders, they will be using t-tests. We are using SPSS version 27 instead of 24. I have made an announcement on your blackboard about how to install your SPSS to version 27. Please go through those guidelines and see whether you are able to install SPSS version 27 or not, so I can be sure that all of you have the software. If you're doing qualitative research, you may be required to do qualitative content analysis or thematic analysis depending upon your area. If you have a moderator variable, then to conduct hierarchical regression analysis. If you have a mediating variable, then we need to use bootstrapping methods and need to do some indirect effect analysis. So you need to study the analysis section of research papers which closely resemble your area of investigation to be more clear about your analytical methods. Okay. The 8th section of your research proposal discusses ethical issues. All academic institutions are particular about any ethical issues that research may have. So to deal with them, all institutions have some form of a policy on ethics. So you need to get familiar with your institution's policy. It is important that in your proposal you identify any ethical issues and describe how you propose to deal with them. For instance, there are some students doing research on sexual harassment. Beware of ethical issues that might arise during data collection or interpretation stage. Some are doing research on dating apps and romantic relations. Beware that your interpretation does not pose any ethical dilemma to the respondents. Okay, so the 9th section of your research proposal is about anticipated limitations of your research. So this section should list any limitation you think you might encounter. For example, the availability of the data, securing permission from the organizations to carry out the study. You will not have unlimited resources, and this may be primarily an academic exercise. You might have to do less than an ideal job. However, it is important to be aware of any limitations that could affect the validity of your conclusions and your generalizations. So you can communicate the structural problems relating to the methodological aspects of the study. So in your opinion, the study design you chose may not be best, but you might have to adopt it for a number of reasons. In this section, you'll need to write down those reasons. For instance, it could be about a time limitation, it could be the accessibility of the data, you're not using probability sampling techniques because you don't have the updated list of population, it could be securing permission from the subjects for interviews, not able to secure enough sample size. So all these problems, all these limitations which you have in your research design, they could be listed in the anticipated limitations of research. Lastly, time frame. So the time frame refers to your work schedule. You must set yourself dates as you need to complete the research within a certain time frame. So list various research goals you need to complete and indicate against each goal a tentative date by which you aim to complete the task. For instance, the sample given in your in the slide here, it is different because they begin their proposal writing in the first 3 weeks, but in our case, we utilize the first 4 to 5 weeks in getting familiar with the concepts of research methods. So our first 5 to 6 weeks they were utilized in getting familiarity with the subject. So your time frame would be different. For instance, our proposal writing is maybe here at 10th 11 week. For first 6 to 7 weeks we utilize in getting familiarity with the subject, and you will be collecting data in the 12th to 13th 14th week, and you will be writing your report in the 15th week. So your time frame would be different as compared to the time frame presented here. Okay, so this is it about today's session. Any ambiguity, any question regarding your today's session? Any question, any ambiguity, anything which is not clear? Um, okay, I can share my research proposal with you, which I wrote many years ago. But this particular format is different because when you are writing a research proposal to claim research grants, for instance, there is a research proposal, my research proposal, which I use to claim research grant. It is very comprehensive. It has 70-80 pages. So it is very difficult for me to it will be very difficult for you to follow that pattern. So I think I've explained sufficiently about the research proposal. So I think it would not be enough to give you a different proposal as a sample, but I will share some article about this specific structure of research proposal. And you can also refer to your book. There is a specific section of book which is dedicated to your research proposal. You can refer to the book of Ranjit. We have two books. One book is we are following Ranjit's book, and we are also following Umesh book. So you can refer to the chapter number, I think maybe 12, which is about research proposal. So in that chapter, it is discussed in detail about what you should write in your research proposal, and there are some examples as well in that particular chapter. I have uploaded the book in your course information. You can download the book from there. Okay, and if you are still not clear about the format of your research proposal, you can discuss with me. I can guide on certain aspects, and if needed, I can write a sample of a research proposal for you as well, if it is not clear. Okay. So you can refer to that chapter, and if anything is not clear, I will write a sample of research proposal for you guys. Okay, any other question? Okay, so let me continue with discussion question. This week's discussion question. You're required to read the methodology section of the papers you have cited in your literature. Read other relevant papers as well and see how other researchers investigated similar issues. They have used different sampling methods. Okay, so you are required to do three things here. First of all, depending upon your research problem and existing evidence, which sampling strategy are you going to use to collect data? Okay, so you need to be clear here that which sampling strategy are you going to use to collect data. Justify why you think it's the best way and why you have not chosen an alternative sampling strategy. This is the first part of your DQ. Secondly, what problems, if you're choosing a particular sampling strategy, what problems choosing that strategy poses for you. Do you think that these problems can be classified as limitations? Yeah, I have discussed this in today's session as well. So you need to tell us at what problems you could possibly have by choosing those sampling strategies. Again, if you want to read about sampling strategies in detail, first of all, you can listen to the recording of last week's session, which was about sampling strategies. And after listening to the recording, you can also read the chapter in the book. Both the books have a chapter dedicated to the sampling strategy. They will give you more information. Okay. So you can also refer to the recording only, and you will see that there are different problems for each sampling strategy which we have discussed. Okay, so do you think that these problems can be classified as limitations? Thirdly, evaluate the post of 3 students, evaluate their justification for their chosen sampling methods. Do you agree with them that their chosen sampling strategy is most suitable for them? Because they will be telling the reasons why they have chosen that particular sampling strategy. So you will be able to be in a good position to evaluate whether their reasons for choosing that sampling strategy are sufficient or not. So the deadline for initial post is November 6th, and the deadline for the responses is November. And again, this week your assignment number 3 is due as well. Please follow this particular structure in writing your assignment. And I have discussed that what should be within each section. Please try to answer all things which I have discussed in today's lecture. So it is categorically mentioned that what you should discuss in each session, in each section. Please go through the recording of today's lecture again before writing your format of your for your research proposal. The deadline is 10th November. Please be proactive about it. The word limit is 1300 to 1500 words, excluding references. We have a separate word limit for the first 3 sections, which is 300 to 350 words. The plagiarism limit is 15%. The references are excluded from database. I have made an attempt to exclude the references from database. So I was able to successfully, do this. I hope that you will confirm this by submitting the assignments. You will realize that the references are no longer part of, they are no longer indicated as a plagiarized text. Please strictly follow the format, and this assignment constitutes 15% of your grade, so you must take it very seriously. Any question? Any question regarding your today's session or discussion question activity of this week or your assignment number 3? Any ambiguity or any question? Any question, any ambiguity? Okay, so please go through the recording. Please go through the readings which are connected with today's lecture. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your patience. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to ask me through WeChat or through email. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot. Bye.